Hello everyone, Jim Hutchison here from CHAUVET Professional. I'm here with my fellow moderator and colleague Ford Sellers. I've got an excellent group of lighting designers from the Church and House of Worship Market for a special edition church lighting newsletter. I'd like to introduce Stephen from Stark Raving Solutions, Duke from CCI Solutions, and Daniel from Church on the Move. Guys, I'm really glad to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I'd like to start out talking about some of your individual LED experiences while working as consultants and designers in houses of worship. Stephen, why don't we start with you? Can you give us some ideas or some examples of some LED experience you've run into across the years?
I guess the best one was the latest where I was able to put in a full LED rig instead of any incandescents. And it was a retrofit to a beautifully renovated church. So we wanted to cut down on the amount of extra conduit that would be fully exposed. So we only had to put in a few circuits and then just run the data. So it turned out very nice.
Excellent.
I know as a manufacturer why I like to tout LED, but from your guys' standpoint, what do you see as the advantages of LED fixtures over incandescent?
Yeah, from my standpoint, low maintenance is a big deal. House of worship market, a lot of times there's no staff guy at the church at all. A lot of times it's a worship pastor or even a senior pastor who's running the whole thing. And so, changing lamps, as simple as it may sound, isn't always a very easy thing to do. Because of course you never realize they're out until the weekend, and now you're trying to get ready for services. And so having low maintenance, having a fixture that you just walk in and it's always on is a big deal. Power savings is another huge thing. Most churches are always looking for ways to be cost conscious and really watch their budgets, because again, not an unlimited budget there. And so LED savings there on the power is really helpful too. And really, even it's sort of related in the South, especially Southeast, energy savings. Putting a house full of conventional lights gets really warm really quick, and in the South where it can be hot, 2/3, 3/4 of the year, LED fixtures are a huge bonus.
I'd go with the maintenance mainly because a lot of the churches I've done, getting to the fixtures is expensive because they're way up there. It's not a theater where, okay, I can go up the catwalk and walk over and get to the lights, or I can lower the pipe in. They're hard to get to. One other thing was color changing. I put a fixture up, I don't have to put 3. I can get any color, or better color mix with just one fixture, so I can cut down the quantity I have to put in.
Coming from the other side of it, where not only am I looking at everything from mainly a design, how's it going to look point of view, we also, being a larger church, we have catwalks where we can get to things easily. We have a team that can do the maintenance on it. But regardless, now that over the past year or two, the LED technology has started to become equal to the tungsten technology as far as from a look standpoint. So it's no longer a choice of whether or not I choose efficient or do I choose it looking exactly the way I want. Now it's getting to the point where I can go, it is more efficient, it is going to cut down on HVAC usage, it is going to cut down on maintenance, it is going to cut down on just the needing to replace lamps, but it also looks exactly how I want, which that change has been huge, I think, as far as me adopting LED.
That's a good key point, because I think up until the last couple of years, it's always been sort of a trade-off. It's always been a choice. Do we go for efficiency? Do we go for low maintenance? And suck it up with the price and the sort of the inconsistencies that come with LED fixtures, or do we stick with the tried and true conventional lighting? And it's great because while there's still a little bit of a cost difference, it's not what it used to be, and you're not seeing the trade-offs in quality anymore from a conventional light to an LED fixture. I'd say by and large, there are probably still a few here and there, but they're really minimal and not things that most people see, which is fantastic.
Another thing is the newer generation of wash fixtures. Previous, you had lots of red, you had 26 red and 26 blue.
The Skittles.
Yeah, the Skittles. Each LED was the color, so you got multiple shadows and they were in different colors. Well, now with chip on board, now you've got quad or even hex. Now it's all from a single source, so that you don't have that mess with, you don't have that problem at all. So that's completely changed just in the last 3 years. So it makes it a lot more,
Yeah.
Useful of a fixture.
So since we're talking about color, I know from having spoken to you guys for a while that color is kind of one of the base building steps of building technology into a church and building the acceptance. How do you go about introducing a church to new technology, and is color the first place that you start, or do they want to start in other places? Do they want to start with movement or with video, or how does that come to be? How do you approach a project like that when someone says, we want to take the step but we don't know how?
Well, I think most churches aren't looking specifically for new technology. They're not specifically looking for color. What they're looking for is creating a engaging environment that people can really be a part of, creating, not manipulating emotion, but really creating an environment that allows you to fully stimulate an emotion. And so, when you get into sort of this epic worship time where it's really kind of sovereign, you can start bringing in lots of blues, lots of purples. You can bring this kind of deep, saturated vibe into the room and really help, those who just sort of are stuck with the visual, which, most of my generation, your generation are, ties it into what's going on in the room as far as sound and emotion, and just brings it all together. And so I think most churches are really looking for that piece more than they are specifically technology or color. But for the visual generations, color is how we get there. I mean, color is really what sort of stimulates us to express and engage in that emotion in a lot of ways.
I agree 100%. Looking at it practically, I do think that is sort of how things tend to evolve. Church on the Move, we kind of made that evolution about 7 years ago. That was sort of the progress. First, bring in some color to the room. Start dimming your house lights some if you're lucky enough to have dimmable house lights, or turn off some of the fluorescents, whatever the case may be. But yeah, start to introduce some color. Stepping into things like moving lights and that, you start need to look at haze and everything. And you don't want to make it a transition where one weekend your congregation is used to full house lights on and full white stage light everywhere, and the next weekend it's a rock show. It's a gradual thing, and yes, starting out with just color wash, that sort of thing, is a great first step, for sure.
What I love that's happening right now is, we've been seeing over the last 5-10 years. I still remember buying my first 36 LED RGB fixtures, 12 years ago. Most churches are very used to the idea of color. They've incorporated at least some, maybe not well, but some, on their stage. What I love, the transition I'm seeing in the last year or two now, is churches and especially senior leadership are going, okay, how do we change it from being a stage versus the audience, and how do we incorporate this thing in full circle now? How do we actually take the audience and make them a part of what's going on the stage? And we've seen lots of ways. I mean, some of it is doing some lighting around the room. I love what you guys do as far as some of the patterns and some of the light that you guys bring out on the walls to sort of take that vibe that's happening on the stage out into the room. I think LED house lights, especially as we get into color fixtures in the house, are fantastic as well, because now, if we've got this incredible worship moment that's happening on stage, we got lots of blues, lots of purples, the stage is just sort of lit up with this sort of deep reverence moment. In the house, it used to be our option was, well, we can leave the house bright, we can knock it down a little bit, or we can just turn it off and, let whatever bleed. Well, now we don't have to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. Now we can go blue. So there's this deep blue, deep purple on stage, this moment of reverence. We can actually take that all the way out into the house and bring everybody into that experience, as opposed to an us versus them. That, for me, is the exciting movement I'm seeing in the last year or two in the house of worship. There's a lot more excitement for making the environment holistic, from the entire environment, and even coming into the room. I mean, from the lobby and some of the other venues on campus, really starting to think more about how we visually engage people holistically and not just point them all towards a stage. That, for me, is the exciting piece.
Just about every design we do now, a discussion comes up about how immersive is this? Mm-hmm. Are you bringing people in, or sometimes people look at a modern church environment with a lot of production, they feel like it's a show. Sometimes it can be, sometimes it's not. One of the ways to kind of avoid that and make it more, it's not just a show, it's a celebration where you're stimulating emotion, you're adding energy to the whole thing, is by that immersive nature.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of a worship service is to engage people in an experience with God. I mean, that's really what it should be. So we're constantly figuring out how to do that. We've long figured out that audio is an important piece of that, but I think it's really only the last 10, 15 years, as the visual generations are coming through, that we've really started realizing how to engage entire rooms and entire bodies of people through lighting and to an extent video as well.
So really when it comes down to it, what the churches are wanting is a more in-depth experience. And how the LEDs get driven into that experience is by consultants such as yourself or lighting designers such as yourself, pushing these to make something that fits the application. Is that basically what I'm hearing?
And what we've experienced is it takes the head leadership of a church deciding they want to head in this direction. And then, they can partner up with someone that does it. I'm a full-time designer at a church. These guys are integrators that come in and help a lot of different churches. But ultimately, it takes vision of a church going, we want to create a more modern experience that is more relevant to our younger generation. And yes, LED fixtures are definitely one of the tools we use to do that. But creating that start, that can never originate from someone that does what I do. It can't originate from these guys. That takes the drivers of the church, the leaders of the church going, let's head in this direction.
Yeah, personally, as soon as a consultant starts telling you to do something, you should run away from that consultant. My viewpoint, and I am biased. I've been both on the tech director side for many years, as well as on the integration side now for a number of years. And I view really the consultant's role. Our role is to help a church, gather its leadership together, help them define their vision for what they're trying to do and their mission for how they're trying to do it, and what kind of key values they have and how they engage their congregation in worship. And then my job is to help them take that vision and put a plan together to get them there.
So would you recommend then that they have a designer on staff, or do you try to help them communicate that message? Say, okay, this would be a look or a feel that would be appropriate for how you can communicate that message, and you help them set that up ahead of time? Or is that something where you want to communicate with someone like a Daniel in that environment and say, I'm going to give you these tools, go to town? Or does it depend on the size of the church? Are there sizes where it changes?
I mean, really, if you can have a designer on staff, absolutely.
Every situation is different.
Yeah.
I think the word designer can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I've met some people who have just started doing this in the past year or two at their church. They're incredible at it. And I've also met some that are horrible. I've met ones that have been doing it 15 years at the church and are horrible. It's a wide array. But and I'm sure you deal with a lot that have no designer at all.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a worship pastor somewhere, and that's where you guys making sure you give them the specific tools is a whole lot more important.
They become the designers.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the tools are really only a small part of it. I mean, really, at some point, once we, for us, once we set up a system and do some training on how to use the equipment, we go home. So the bigger challenge is who's actually going to teach you to light? I mean, who's going to teach you that in a deep worshipful moment, bright yellow is probably not the right color to use? Who's going to teach you that in a big upbeat song, making everything dark blue doesn't really make sense? It doesn't fit the vibe. At some point you have to understand and learn these design concepts and how the visual fits into the emotion of what's happening and all those pieces. And I think that's where a lot of small to medium-sized churches struggle with.
So when you say a small to medium-sized church, how many parishioners are you talking about? Are you talking about 200? Are you talking about 400? Are you talking about...
I don't know. I think you're talking about anybody from I have lights period to, probably 2,000 people. I mean, if you don't have a lighting guy on staff or a good lighting guy who's a solid volunteer and could be on staff if you had money, somebody's got to learn it. I mean, all the tools in the world do you no good if nobody knows how to use them.
Is that something that you typically run into in the market? Is these situations where they can have the tools, they have the funds to have the fun, engaging tools, but there's no one to actually implement the design?
Well, that's where, when we go into a church, our first thing is to do vision casting. It's the same way I deal with a choreographer in dance. Don't try and talk to me technology. Talk to me about your dance. Or church, talk to me about your church. What vision how is your church service, how are you reaching the people, then we can talk technology, take that, translate, be that bridge to the technology and say, all right, here are the tools we feel you need to get your message out the way you want to get it out with the personnel you have. I'm not going to give you this lighting console because it requires somebody who has studied it and learned it and run it, as opposed to I can give you a much simpler system. Or I'll preset a bunch of stuff and it's easy for you to run. Or you've got a designer, I can talk to him, we're going to give him the tools, we're going to do a first focus and we're going to walk away and not have to do anything. So it's a level of what, but you start with what they can handle by figuring out how do they want to get there. What is their vision of, and it could be that they've got, I've done a church where the first service is very contemporary. They need tools for contemporary. The next service, full vestments with a choir in robes, which is an hour and a half different, or an hour off. So you've got to have the same room, but the different feel, and they wanted, so we gave them a set of tools that gave them the ability to do both.
One of the things we're focusing a lot more with our training, every time we install a system, obviously we're encouraging and offering training on functionality of the equipment we've sold them. One of the things that we're really working a lot harder to encourage and to incorporate into that training even is a lot more how and why, not so much just the function of the console. For instance, there's a lighting console that we use a lot for a lot of our projects, and they happen to have a bunch of pretty solid training videos online. And so a lot of times, when we're slated to come in and train somebody, I'll send them all those videos a week or two ahead and say, have your people watch these. Because when I come out, you basically have booked us for half a day to come out and train you on this. I'm not going to cover anything that's in this video because you can watch the video, you don't need that. What we're going to talk about is practical application and how this makes sense in the context of service, because that's the stuff that there's not a lot of videos on. I mean, there's manuals, there's practical videos, there's how-tos, whatever, and those are all fantastic. I mean, we have access to more of that stuff than ever before. But what still is not easily accessible is the understanding of the basic knowledge as to why we do this stuff. And so I know for us, we're really trying to focus a lot more on the why and the reasoning behind why you would do certain things in a service as a part of our training, so that when we leave, it's not, oh, we had that one great service and then you left and it was terrible from there.
You find that the congregations accept and sort of run with this information when you give them the additional training?
Sometimes.
The congregations or the volunteer teams?
Yes.
Two very different things here.
Yeah.
We were having a discussion with this last night. A church to try and go from very traditional to contemporary overnight, you usually do get a lot of pushback from your congregation. The volunteer team, I can only speak to how ours are. They're very open to new technology, changing. Of course, these are guys that we've cultivated over time, and we have everybody from people who were there for the first week volunteering with us to guys who have literally been there for 15 or 20 years volunteering, and they may have a normal job throughout the week, but because of all the time they've spent learning these systems with us, running these shows with us, you can put them up against professional operators any day. And I think you probably find that across the church spectrum, is you've got a real range from the complete newbies.
Absolutely.
To I know guys that guys at Willow Creek Church who literally have been running lights there for 25 years and almost need a second job, that are volunteers.
Yeah.
It's pretty nasty.
But you use the word volunteer. I can go in and train people, and 9 months later they've got a whole new group who have no knowledge of what the last group went, because nothing was passed on. So they almost have to call you back in and get you to train the new group on how to use the tools.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, something like that is a problem in the culture of the church, not something we can change on our end.
No, that's...
You sort of bring up a good point. I'd love to hit it. A lot of times the tech team, as you go into renovation and you start making a bunch of changes, the tech team is on board, ready to go. This is awesome, let's do this. And it's easy to sit back and go, well, of course they are, because they're the tech team and they're getting new toys and all this stuff. And I really fight back against that, because yes, they're more inclined to be willing to change and to do new things. But what's happening within the confines of that tech team is they're having a vision cast to them, and they are talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, or what could be. And what scares me with a lot of churches that are making dramatic changes, I mean, churches that go from, stark white, house lights never go below 50%, that kind of thing, to this dramatic swing overnight, is while the tech team's talking about it constantly, and the worship team's talking about it constantly, they all understand what's coming, they get why, they're on board. People aren't having that conversation with their congregations. So I've witnessed a few different churches against recommendations who have basically flipped a switch, and one week they did it up this way, and then starting the next week, okay, we're flipping the house lights down, we're going to do tons of color, all this, and the shock that happens with the congregation is just crazy. Well, why? Because nobody has cast any vision with those people and gotten them comfortable, or not, maybe not even comfortable is the right word, at least explain why these changes are being made, why we're doing the things that we're doing, where we're trying to go, and sort of soften the blow of all these things. Because, I mean, frankly, a lot of people, I mean, change is constant. I mean, change is constant around us. We change our phones every couple of months, every couple of years. We change things constantly. But it's usually, we're the ones driving it, and we talk ourselves into it for, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard, but we're selling ourselves on this. We're casting vision for ourselves as to why I need that new phone, or why, whatever. This stuff doesn't happen a lot of times with these congregations, and it's a huge mistake.
So delivery of message, not just between the worship leaders, but also out to the congregation. Right. And I would assume it's a two-way street. The congregation also communicating back, this is what we want to see, and this is why, or this is how.
Sometimes somebody's got to lead vision, though.
Ultimately, what it takes, and this is why the transition worked very well for us, was it was our leadership, our head pastor going in and saying, we're going to start changing the way we do our services. We're going to start using more production. Our music's going to change. All these things are going to change, and here's why. Mm-hmm. All of you people who are 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, your music, you've been listening to it here. What you like has been going on for the past 10 or 20 years. It's now time for us to change and approach a different generation and make it what they want, so we can start pulling in these younger people and keep our church growing. And I imagine that when I'm 60 years old, whatever church I'm in, I'm going to hate the music. I hope so, because it means that they're going to be targeting the next generation coming in. But you're right, far too often the changes are just made, or even in the worst case scenario, you'll have a tech team make the change and the music ministry doesn't. So you've got guys who are wanting to do concert lighting, and you've got a music ministry that's still singing songs from 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. In horrible combination, very detrimental to just the flow, the energy. Like we said in the beginning, all of this is about building emotion and service. Mm-hmm. If you don't have all your teams working together, from your production teams to your music teams to just your speakers and leadership to the guys making the slides, the whole style has to be tied together for it all to support the emotion and energy of all the other parts.
Yeah, and if you don't be good about bringing people along a vision with you, you really shouldn't be shocked when they're mad at you.
But I think that is a great point for us to kind of call this. It has been wonderful and informative, and thank you guys for coming in, and thanks for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Enjoyed it.